Okay, so picture this. A federal judge just completely lost it in a courtroom, and what went down is absolutely insane. We're talking about Judge Brinkema in Virginia basically standing up and saying, why the hell is Lindsay Halligan still calling herself the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia when she's been fired? She's done. She's gone. Get her name off the legal documents and stop pretending she has any authority here. And here's the wild part. The judge wasn't even talking to Halligan directly. She was talking to the regular prosecutors, the line attorneys who show up every day doing the actual work. And these prosecutors, these career people, they looked at the judge and said something shocking. Judge, we're being forced to do this. The Department of Justice is telling us to keep her name on everything. She's technically our boss, so we don't have a choice. And Judge Brinkema fires back, basically saying, are you kidding me right now? After all these court rulings across the country, after the Third Circuit said Alina Habba had to go, you're just going to pretend you have a real U.S. attorney when you don't? Don't you think that's going to completely mess up all your other cases? This is absolutely wild. We've got federal judges openly questioning whether the Department of Justice even has legitimate authority to prosecute cases right now. And when you see how the DOJ responded, it gets even crazier. So the Department of Justice puts out this official statement from Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, and honestly, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever read from a government agency. They're essentially saying the judges in Virginia are running a campaign of bias and hostility against Lindsay Halligan and her prosecutors. Let me break down what they're actually claiming here. The DOJ is saying the judges are picking on them. The federal judges are being unfair. They're saying Lindsay is just doing her job, following guidance from the Office of Legal Counsel, and she doesn't deserve to have her reputation questioned. Then it gets really bold. The statement says the Department of Justice has no tolerance for undemocratic judicial activism, and they're not going to be deterred by rogue judges who can't be impartial because of their political views. Now, here's what's actually happening beneath all that dramatic language. Lindsay Halligan was never a federal prosecutor before this appointment. Never. She didn't even intern at a prosecutor's office. She has zero experience doing this kind of work. And according to multiple reports, she was put in this position specifically to go after James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, people viewed as political opponents. And they completely botched it. Halligan apparently was running a grand jury by herself, and somehow there ended up being a fake second indictment that the grand jury never even reviewed. They tried to pass it off as the real indictment for Comey. She gave wrong legal instructions to the grand jury. She brought in an FBI agent as a witness who wasn't supposed to testify because he'd been exposed to attorney-client privileged information. But we didn't even get to debate those problems because Judge Curry disqualified Halligan right from the start, saying she didn't have legal authority to be there in the first place. So let's talk about why this matters, because this isn't about politics. This is about basic constitutional law. The Constitution says that U.S. attorneys have to be appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. That's the standard process. Now, there's a federal law that recognizes sometimes Senate confirmation takes time, so it allows the president to put someone in as an interim U.S. attorney for 120 days. But here's the key part. You only get to do that once. That's it. One shot. The 120 days can be extended, but only if the district court judges vote to extend it. These are judges from different political parties appointed by different presidents. If they don't extend the term, that person has to leave, and you can't just appoint another interim person to replace them. So here's what happened in Virginia. The administration picked a Republican guy named Siebert, and the Senate was ready to confirm him. But there was a problem. Siebert looked at the cases against James Comey and Letitia James and said he couldn't prosecute them in good conscience. He thought the cases were frivolous, that there wasn't evidence there. So the administration used their one interim appointment, pushed Siebert out, and then put in Halligan. But you can't do that. That's not a Democratic or Republican issue. That's just what the law says. You get one interim appointment, and they already used it. The exact same thing happened in New Jersey with Alina Habba. She stayed past her 120 days. The judges didn't extend her term, so the first assistant U.S. attorney was supposed to take over. But then Habba fired that person and said she was taking the job back, and the judges said, no, you can't do that. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals shut her down completely. And now in Virginia, The judges from all political backgrounds are furious. They're saying, get Halligan out of here. She's basically squatting in an office where she has no legal authority to be. So here's what's really happening that's got these judges so upset. They're feeling multiple things simultaneously. First, their courts are being massively disrespected. These are federal judges with constitutional authority, and they're being told to just accept someone operating in their courtrooms without proper legal credentials. Second, they're worried about all the other cases that have nothing to do with Comey or Letitia James. We're talking about drug trafficking cases, espionage cases, fraud prosecutions, sex trafficking cases. All of these defendants now have potential grounds to appeal or get their cases dismissed because the person prosecuting them didn't have legitimate authority. And third, a lot of these judges worked at the Department of Justice earlier in their careers. They're watching this institution that used to have high professional standards just completely fall apart, and it's painful for them to witness. The legal concept here is critical. When someone is operating without proper appointment authority, they become what's called a legal nullity. The Third Circuit literally used that term for Haba. A legal nullity means legally, it's as if they don't exist in that role. They have no legitimate power to make prosecutorial decisions. So every indictment filed, every case supervised is potentially compromised. And defendants are absolutely going to challenge their prosecutions by saying, this wasn't legitimate, my constitutional rights were violated. Now, the Department of Justice is claiming the Office of Legal Counsel has approved this whole arrangement, but that's not really what's happening. What actually happened is political officials like Todd Blanche gave a direct order. Keep calling her U.S. attorney. Keep putting her name on documents. We know she's been disqualified, but do it anyway. And the legal theory they're apparently hoping to justify is absolutely wild. Judge Curry said Halligan is disqualified and is a legal nullity, but the judge didn't explicitly say leave the building, so therefore she can stay and keep operating. Think about that for a second. Someone has been declared to have no legal authority, but because the judge didn't say walk out the door, they're claiming she can continue prosecuting cases. That's the argument. You can't run a U.S. attorney's office with someone who's been declared a legal nullity. That's exactly what Lindsay Halligan is right now, according to court rulings. And she's even less qualified than Alina Habba was, with less experience and more problems. Here's what's interesting. With Habba, the administration eventually backed down. They saw the Third Circuit ruling and recognized they were going to lose, so they basically accepted it. But with Halligan, they're doing the complete opposite. They're doubling down, attacking judges, refusing to accept the same legal principles. Let me give you an analogy that explains why this is so problematic. Imagine you're at a baseball game with your family. Someone runs onto the field who doesn't belong there. Maybe the first time you think, okay, security will handle it, but then this person keeps disrupting the game, takes the pitcher's ball, throws the bases around, won't leave the field. And to stop all this disruption, all that person would have to do is just go sit in the stands where they belong. With Lindsay Halligan, all the Department of Justice would have to do is nothing. Just don't put her name on documents. Don't have her show up to the office. Let the first assistant run things properly until this gets resolved through correct legal channels. The office would function fine. Cases would proceed without constitutional problems, but instead they insist on putting her name on everything. She won't leave the office, and it's disrupting serious criminal cases, drug trafficking, espionage, fraud, sex trafficking, real cases that matter for public safety. And the judges are saying, why are you doing this? Just stop. Let us handle business like adults. And Bondi and Blanche are responding by attacking the judges as biased. Here's the thing. There actually is a legitimate way to make Lindsay Halligan the U.S. attorney. Nominate her formally and have the Senate confirm her through the proper constitutional process. The Senate has a Republican majority, so if she's qualified, it should be straightforward. But that's not happening, and everyone knows why. Because she's inexperienced, incompetent, and would never survive confirmation hearings where senators would ask about her qualifications and what happened with the Comey grand jury disaster. So instead, they're trying to force it through defiance of court orders and attacks on federal judges. With Habba, they eventually gave her a different title and stepped back while saying they'd keep fighting legally. They could do the same with Halligan. But they're refusing because this has become even more political and because Halligan was specifically brought in to prosecute political opponents. So instead of following what multiple courts are saying, they're just declaring, we'll keep calling her U.S. attorney because that's what leadership wants. Law doesn't matter. Public safety doesn't matter. The professional prosecutors trying to do their jobs don't matter. This is genuinely unprecedented. We have federal judges appointed by different presidents from different political parties, all saying the same thing. This person doesn't have authority, remove her, and the Department of Justice is responding by calling them rogue judges engaged in judicial activism. There used to be general agreement across the political spectrum about basic principles. Who has authority to prosecute? How appointments work? What courts can do? Those weren't partisan issues. They were just legal issues based on the Constitution. But now we're seeing those fundamental principles ignored when they become inconvenient. And the damage to institutional credibility is severe. We've got career prosecutors telling judges we're being forced to do this, even though we know it's wrong. That tells you everything about how far things have gone off the rails. And it's only going to get messier as defendants start challenging their prosecutions based on this authority problem. This is absolutely wild, folks. We're watching basic rule of law principles collapse in real time, and the people in charge are attacking judges instead of following court orders. It's unprecedented, it's dangerous, and honestly, it's hard to see how this ends well for anyone involved.